Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Two women and a man have been sentenced for enforced labour and exploitation offences after a police investigation into nail bars across the country. Officers from 5 forces managed to uncover a human trafficking operation which forced young Vietnamese women to work in the nail bars with little or no pay. The judge described the defendants as thoroughly devious, dishonest and manipulative, who'd exploited vulnerable young women for their own financial greed. Ed Hauker was in court.
This is the moment when police enter Nail Bar Deluxe in Bath in their fight against human exploitation. At this raid, 2 young women were discovered, illegal immigrants found to have been trafficked into Britain and forced to work for little or no pay in the nail bar trade. If ex-customers in Bath had thought this Vietnamese business offered good value for money, they now know why. The business in Bath was certainly profitable. Police found £60,000 in envelopes stuffed into a teddy bear, and the case unlocked a network of exploitation which finally unravelled in Stafford Crown Court. Today, 3 people were sentenced for offences under the Modern Slavery Act. Hung Tu Huynh, known as Jenny, ran the nail bar in Bath and was sentenced to 5 years in prison on 2 counts of conspiracy under the Act. Another couple who ran a nail bar in Burton-on-Trent, which exploited young women too, were also sentenced. Viet Hang Huynh, known as Ken, was given 4 years in prison for 2 counts of conspiracy, and his partner, Zhang Hung Chen, known as Susan, received a 2-year suspended sentence for 1 count of conspiracy. The convictions weren't about sexual exploitation. Instead, Judge Michael Chambers QC contrasted the poverty and vulnerability of the immigrant workers with the highly lucrative nail bar businesses they were forced to work in. For modern slavery campaigners, the context matters here. In September, the UK's anti-slavery commissioner said the risk of exploitation of Vietnamese migrants was so great that nail bars should be licensed. And this is the first successful prosecution of those who've exploited young Vietnamese nail bar workers.
These were young, vulnerable women who were exploited, and they were forced to work with little or no pay whilst they were provided food and accommodation. They have no alternative because they've got no immigration status, no standing in our society. They're controlled by these individuals and feel they have little alternative.
The judge called those convicted thoroughly devious, dishonest and manipulative. But police warned that the network of exploitation could spread wider still. And the case illustrates how modern slaves are found not just in cannabis farms or the sex trade, but in plain sight on the UK high street.
Now, when people treat themselves to a trip to the nail bar, in a few cases that little taste of luxury comes at a terrible price to some of those on the other side of the manicure pad. Today, 3 people, all Vietnamese, were sentenced to a total of 9 years for modern-day slavery offences, trafficking and exploiting teenage girls, who they forced to work for nothing in nail bars across England. It is a breakthrough moment, one might say, because even though Vietnamese are one of the largest groups of nationals trafficked to the UK, until now, believe it or not, there has not been one single successful prosecution. Julie, who's reported on modern slavery from around the world, of course, has been following today's case.
It could be any nail bar on any high street in Britain. On the face of it, a legitimate business in Bath. On the wall, the boss's certificate. But 2 teenage Vietnamese girls found here had been trafficked and exploited, working for little or no pay. This was the woman behind it, known as Jenny. The detective who carried out the raid said the signs were clear from the start.
They were quite relaxed but looked tired and were working as I first went in. But as soon as Jenny came in, she, in Vietnamese, was saying to them words to the effect, and I had an interpreter there, was able to interpret this as we were in the nail bar, saying, have you told them what we told you to say? Have you stuck to the story? Did you tell the police what I told you to tell the police? And the girls visibly were shaking and looked nervous and frightened that Jenny had arrived in the nail bar.
Upstairs, the garret where it's believed at least one of the girls slept. And here, the proceeds of exploitation, a teddy bear stuffed with £60,000 found at Jenny's home. But even though the girls were rescued by the police, such were their ties to their traffickers, they left care and returned to them, one of them discovered later in another nail bar in Staffordshire. There are also complex cultural issues in tackling Vietnamese trafficking. As a Vietnamese outreach worker for the charity Refuge told me, her identity hidden because the issues are so sensitive.
There's a lot of threatening to them about, if you don't do this, I will do this to you. If you don't do this, I will do this to your family. So there are lots of ways that they can control this victim, directly and indirectly.
And particularly through that link to family networks.
They probably say, we've got your family contact detail, we know where they live. And I think because of all this information that they had on the victim, so they're too scared to do anything against the trafficker.
The judge described the trio jailed today as highly devious, dishonest and manipulative. There are also growing calls for nail bars to be properly licensed. Today may have brought a legal breakthrough, but there is a long way to go yet in tackling a crime right at the end of our fingertips. Julie Etchingham, News at 10.